BetOnline.ag, proud sponsor of the program. There's Marco D'Amico. Happy to see everybody. I'm Shaun Starr. We're talking about Stanley Cup odds. The Edmonton Oilers, brother, plus 300 to win the Stanley Cup, right there with Dallas, and Carolina is next. How about the Toronto Maple Leafs? I understand they lose game 3 in overtime, but a valiant comeback by the Maple Leafs. I'm not here to tell you to put a dollar down on Toronto, but let me ask you this before we move on. Is this the year the drought ends? The Canadiens, the last Canadian team to win the Stanley Cup. The Edmonton Oilers are knocking on the door again. They're another odds-on favorite. I mean, how realistic do you put the Edmonton Oilers' chances of winning the Stanley Cup this year, Marco? How realistic?
Again, to me, it's just the inconsistency in goaltending.
Yeah.
It bothers me. It will always bother me. Now, granted, Pickard has been great for them, right? In this run, right? Skinner
Been good enough. He's been good enough.
And so to me, I think they cannot move forward without getting a goaltender. So in this nutshell of a situation, it's really hard to tell because their goaltending can be as unpredictable as anything. To me, Dallas with Ottinger is just,
I know,
next level. Carolina, I mean, we'll see about Anderson's ability to stay healthy. And the Toronto Maple Leafs are having their own goaltending issues right now with Wool coming in, looked good enough in game 3, or in game 2, but they couldn't, unfortunately, let in a couple of softies in game 4. And I'm just
agreed.
Not sure about that. So when you look at the Leafs, I think the Leafs are, how do you put this? I think the Leafs are a more balanced team. Apologies, Habs fans. I think they're a more balanced team. I think they're a team that's built for the playoffs now. What I'm liking, and I got to be honest with you, I think the one thing that I'm really appreciating is how good Mitch Marner has been for them.
Hey, no kidding.
Out of the star players on that team, the one that makes me the happiest to see, and I know everyone would be like, oh, Toronto. The happiest I'm going to see is Mitch Marner, because Mitch Marner, really the worst player of the top 4 right now for the Toronto Maple Leafs has been Austin Matthews.
Yes, and had a nice assist here yesterday, but I agree. William Nylander,
Nylander has been
worth
every penny since he signed that contract. Just
all day.
Incredible growth from that player, constant playoff performer for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Don't sleep on them. But the Florida Panthers, what a comeback yesterday. It was 3-1. I'm just going to put it out there.
100%. 100%.
They win that game 5-4.
That's crazy. Sign up at betonline.ag, a trusted space in the online gaming community for over 25 years. Easy to sign up. And first-time depositors get a bunch of free spins, a bunch of free bets, and the easiest way to get your money out. And if you're in crypto, your deposits get even fatter because they embrace the crypto depositors. So have a look at betonline.ag. Fun to have some fun while you're watching the NHL playoffs. The Montreal Canadiens are ready to make some moves, apparently. We talk about cap space. We wonder about how much leeway the Canadiens are going to have. How aggressive is the management team led by Jeff Gorton and general manager Ken Hughes? What is their plan? One thing they've told us, and I do appreciate this, and I try to tell people as often as I can, kind of pay attention. Jeff Gorton and Ken Hughes, when they speak, they leave some crumbs that we can pick up and we can say, oh, maybe this is what they're thinking. Jeff Gorton has been kind of open, Marco, when he speaks about what he envisions his team doing this summer. And one of those strategies, as he's mentioned, is the RFA market, aka the infamous offer sheet. So before we get into viable players that perhaps aren't a pipe dream, are grounded in reality, let's start with how grounded is Jeff Gorton in reality when it comes to the actual viable strategy of offer sheets. I mean, he let the cat out of the bag. He's telling everybody, mind your P's and Q's because I'm watching you, so be prepared. So let's start there. Let's talk about how viable is an offer sheet in today's NHL.
I thought of an offer sheet was more viable in a flat cap situation.
Yeah.
And I think when you look at, the cap going up to the way it is, there, I believe, is 20 teams that have 20 million or more to spend this summer.
Okay.
So it's going to be hard to swindle them unless some of these teams spend egregiously between now and say July 2nd, right?
Sure.
And so I think you have to see where the dust settles first, right? Like the Oilers had cap space and then chose, to ignore Dylan Holloway and Philip Broberg, right? They had the
Yeah.
cap space to sign
Yeah.
them, but they decided to go and sign Jeff Skinner for $3 million.
Huh.
I'm pretty sure that $3 million alone would have been enough to sign at least one of them, right? And now
Yeah.
Jeff Skinner is like kind of there. And what a season Broberg and Holloway had for the Blues, right?
Mhm.
So like that's the way I see it. In this context, I think it's going to be, kind of like what the Canadians tried to do with Sebastian Aho. They're going to have to find a team with, financial woes and try to take
Mm.
advantage of them.
Mm.
So not necessarily a team that's plentiful, that's necessarily close to the cap, but a team where the player that they're targeting and that team cannot come to terms on a deal, and the team being a little bit too greedy in terms of their ask for the player, then you can go around them and do the offer sheet.
Right.
And for like we were talking about Anaheim, for example, another team potentially for and without being mean to them or whatever, but another team to consider for such a move would be like Winnipeg with Gabe Vilardi,
Mhm.
right? Would
Yes.
with the seasons that Gabe Vilardi has had, the 2 seasons that he's had in Winnipeg, would it make sense to throw 8-9 million at him? Example, I'm not saying the Canadians do this, but 8-9 million at him, pay, because 9 million over 5 years is a first, a second, and a third.
Right. Right.
And keep in mind, offer sheets can only happen as of July 1st, and it's 2026 picks. So, and it has to be your own. It cannot be,
Okay.
oh, we have another
Y
first round pick. No,
Yeah,
no,
yeah,
no.
yeah. Yes.
So
And
anything as of July 1st, anything under 9.17 mil is a first, a second, and a third. Anything above 9.2 is 2 firsts, a second, and a third. And then anything above, I believe it's 12 million or 13 million,
yeah.
is 4 first round picks.
So, like, when we look at the possible candidates here, I mean, can we think if they had their pick of the litter, they're looking at forwards, right? If they're going to offer sheet anybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
So before I get into that, there's a nice little tie-in here, right? Because when you look at the who's who of potential RFAs on the market,
Mhm.
you don't have to go too far down any list to land on Noah Dobson's name. You and I have spoken about Noah Dobson, it feels like since Christmas of 2024. And so here's the connection. The New York Islanders have been poking around Jeff Gorton. The Montreal Canadiens say Jeff Gorton is a Montreal Canadien. End of sentence. Thanks for calling. Good luck in your pursuit of finding the heir apparent to Lou Lamoriello.
Mhm.
So let's talk about Jeff Gorton, the New York Islanders. Let's talk about Noah Dobson and a potential offer sheet there.
Mhm.
So walk me through the New York Islanders poking around Jeff Gorton, and how does that impact the possibility of trying to get Noah Dobson?
I don't think the two are correlate. The two correlate at all.
You don't think
Uh,
so? If the Canadians said no, why would they, Okay.
why would what?
Hey?
I'm sorry. Why would what?
Well, just out of sheer stubbornness, I'll just because the Canadians said no to me, I'm going to match whatever offer sheet they put on the table for Noah Dobson. You're not getting Noah Dobson. I've chosen to take it personally. You said no to me.
That depends, right? So, like, if they can't come to like Noah Dobson, you use him as an example. I mean,
Yeah,
there's going to be others that I'd like to go over, but
yeah,
one of the key things to consider with Noah Dobson is he changed his agent a couple
right.
months ago, right?
Yep.
So now he's with Olivier Fortier, being covering him as we speak, and negotiations are ongoing with the Islanders, obviously on pause now because they don't have a general manager. But if they can't come to terms, he's got, I believe, 1 year left before he could walk right into unrestricted free agency, right? So you just go to arbitration, take your 1 year, and then you walk right out, and there's nothing the Islanders can do, and they're going to have to trade you for less
Yep.
than if you were to be traded and then sign an extension with the team that is acquiring you. And then, like the Carolina Hurricanes did with Mikko Rantanen, right? Trading him with an extension netted them Stankoven 2 first-round picks and 2 third-round picks. Well, that wouldn't have happened if they wouldn't have paid that much if an extension wasn't included, right? So the same applies to a Dobson. The only way they're going to trade a Dobson is if they can't come to terms with a deal, and then Noah Dobson's agent Olivier Fortier begins to, former Hab by the way, begins to look elsewhere, like Sebastian Aho did, to try and get his money. And then it becomes a question of, do the Islanders want to handcuff themselves to that kind of salary now? Yeah. As it seems like there's a kind of a forced youth movement from winning the lottery and then bringing in guys like Cal Ritchie, Eiserman, Isaiah George, guys like that into the lineup, right? Like they're going to have no choice, as well as aging defensemen, like Pelech and Pollock. I don't envy. I don't envy announcers, especially in New York, when it comes to that pairing. But like those guys, seemingly, on their last legs. I'm not saying that they're done, but they're not the top pairing they once were. They were fantastic for the Islanders. So you got to factor that in as well. There's a lot of moving pieces. The Islanders really kind of put themselves in a situation where they went all in on an old core, and now they've had no choice.
Well, that's it. So I don't know. I don't know how you let a 25-year-old leave, but
that's the thing, right? It really depends. When you go in, it depends how heavy they want to rebuild, if they even decide to go that route. But if you're the New York Islanders, for example, you think to yourself, how could you let a 25-year-old go like that? The Chicago Blackhawks traded Alex DeBrincat, who was 24 at the time, for a 7th overall pick, a 2nd-round pick, and a 3rd-round pick. And the GM that did that sits next to me at Habs games, in Pierre Dorion, and he said, I thought everybody thought that was really good value at the time, and I couldn't understand why Chicago was doing it. But we all know today Chicago is looking to burn it to the ground, right? Yeah. This is the same team that decided not to qualify Dylan Strome when he was a restricted free agent and just let him go for free to the Washington Capitals, and now he's like a first-line center. So they didn't necessarily do that with the intent of gaining maximum value or being a good team. The Chicago Blackhawks wanted to burn it to the ground. And we still see it to this day, like burnt to the ground, going to take 2 to 3 years just to get moving, right?
Okay, so let's talk about some other names here. I don't want to spend the entire episode on Noah Dobson, but
but one team that I'm extremely curious about, and we'll see how these playoffs play out, is the Toronto Maple Leafs and Matthew Knies.
Oh man, come on, dude. Like, I like Marco Rossi a lot out of Minnesota.
We're going to get to that in a second as well.
But Matthew Knies, holy this second round pick.
I'm not saying the Canadiens are going to do this, but if the Toronto Maple Leafs sign Mitch Marner and attempt to retain John Tavares, watch out.
Well, I was going to say, like, how do you get it all in that sense? This guy, he's a power forward. He plays on both special teams.
If he's unsigned, I'm telling you right now, if he's unsigned on July 1st, watch out. Because it's, it is incredible to me. And really, this is kind of the irony, like where your own success kind of burns you.
Yeah.
So normally when you sign a player outside of the NCAA, and they jump in and burn the first year of their contract.
Yeah.
So, like, for example, Lane Hudson. Say the Canadiens don't sign Lane Hudson this summer, and it gets to July 1st next year. Lane Hudson is not eligible for an offer sheet. Did you know that?
Yeah. No, I did not know that.
Yeah.
No.
Ivan Demidov, same concept. If he gets to the end of his contract, he is not eligible for an offer sheet. Why? Because he did not accrue what the NHL calls a professional season in the first year of his contract. You have to accrue 3 professional seasons to be eligible for an offer sheet. What does that mean? That means that when you look at a player like Hudson, safe, right? Because the first year of his contract, he only played 2 games.
Right.
Well, you can't do it. Demidov, same concept. I think he only played 7. When you looked at Matthew Knies joined the Toronto Maple Leafs at the end of the season in 2022, 2023, he played exactly 10 games.
Okay.
Thereby turning that into a professional season.
Right.
So now at the end of this season, he is a completely free, unrestricted free agent because the Toronto Maple Leafs went to 7 games and lost. It was really unfortunate. A guy like Matthew Knies, the Toronto Maple Leafs have about like 22 mil in cap space. They have to re-sign Matthew Knies. They have to re-sign Mitch Marner. They have to come in with a bunch of other guys to fill out the rest of the roster.
Correct.
You're going to have to look for value deals in certain points. But the thing that's going to be the most telling, Matthew Knies' fate is going to be tied specifically to what happens with
Right.
Mitch Marner.
What about a couple of other names there? Like, I don't know if Buffalo is ripe for the picking. I know Kevin Adams says that he was going to reach out to Alan Walsh, like kind of as soon as the season ended, to talk about the future of JJ Peterka, who's 23 years old. He does not have arbitration rights going into this offseason.
I don't think he's an offer sheet candidate, but he's definitely a trade candidate.
And the other name we dropped too, the 23-year-old Marco Rossi out of the Minnesota Wild. What do you know about the Wild and kind of where they're at in terms of financial pressure and Marco Rossi's future, Marco?
Yeah, I mean, they're going to have cap space this summer, right? I think they're going to have about 20 million in cap space because the buyout penalties of Zach Parise and
Suter,
Ryan Suter are dropping.
Yeah.
So, and then the cap going up, so now they have space. But the thing is like with this, Marco Rossi had a 60-point season, right? But he had like 12 points in his last 30 games.
Okay.
And then was put on the fourth line in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Right.
21 goal season as a rookie, though. That's pretty impressive.
Right. But again, centering Kaprizov.
Right.
And Boldy. And so like how much, when Jeff Gorton said you don't need the best center as long as you have play driving wingers.
Yes.
That's what they're talking about. And I know a lot of people will turn around and be like, well, then he could do the same thing with Demidov because Demidov is supposed to be the next Kaprizov. Well, maybe, yeah. But the difference with Carolina, with Minnesota is they have Joel Eriksson Ek, right? So like you can balance that out, right? Because they're two different styles of players. Marco Rossi and Nick Suzuki, I don't know that they would jive necessarily well.
Interesting. Okay.
And they'd be too. I don't think Nick Suzuki is small. I think he's average.
Yeah.
But he's thick, right? Like he's 6 foot, but like 205, 207. He's a well filled up player. But then you have a smaller Marco Rossi, yes, 5'9" at 185 pounds. So him too, he's sturdy. But you're gonna want at some point, and especially if you just signed Jake Evans to another 4 years, you're gonna want some muscle down the middle at some point. And I'm not a more size guy, so I'm like iffy about Rossi unless you want to play him on the wing.
Yeah.
Ultimately, though, I think Minnesota would love to get offer sheeted for Marco Rossi.
How about I have another name for you, right? We're trying to fill the center role here, right? Talking about offer sheets and the potential that it could happen. Here's a 24-year-old who is arbitration eligible and was right there with AK Bars Kazan in their run to the Gagarin Cup final a couple of seasons ago. Dmitry Voronkov, Columbus Blue Jackets. And what do we know about like kind of where they're at? And it's something I want to talk about. Columbus is an interesting team, but when I say that name, what goes through your head? 24-year-old center.
Adam Fantilli's running man.
Yeah.
I just, he was so good for them, in pockets, and really kind of came to his own. And Sean Monahan's worked with him as well. But I just feel like offensively speaking, that's not the player I would look at.
Okay.
When you, I'm sorry for typing. I wanted to see how a certain player did for the rest of the season. One guy that nobody's talking about out of Columbus that's not necessarily an offer sheet candidate.
Yeah.
But that would make a world of sense. Kent Johnson.
I like him a lot. Yeah. I like him a lot.
57 points in 68 games. Again, running man with Adam Fantilli. This is a guy that would make a world of sense. Now, again, Columbus's young forwards, I don't think they're going to touch him.
Right.
I think if they're going to overhaul anything, it's going to be on defense. They're going to continue that process. They're going to continue to look for defensemen. And, that's a team that I think is going to be active in trying to trade their first round pick. We'll get into that in a bit. But when it comes to, Voronkov, he fits that core so well.
Yeah,
and,
I know.
The way that he plays, it's just, I liked the fact that he kind of came in and, again, a 23 goal scorer But I don't see him very much as a center. He's very much a winger, right? He's listed as a center, just like Mitch Marner is listed as a
Yeah,
center, but he's
exactly.
very much a winger, right? And so you factor in now you've got Marchenko, Johnson, Fantilli, Voronkov, Cole Sillinger's still kind of there.
Sure.
And then you factor in, you have to factor in Gavin Brindley playing in the minors for them right now. Del Bel Belouz, Caden Lindstrom just, has played his first game
Right.
in the WHL in like a year.
Yeah.
They have guys, and then they still have their 13th overall pick this season. So like, I think at forward, there's not much they need, and they have all the cap space in the world. So like, offer sheeting them, you'd have to make a deal out of this world. And I
I
just
agree.
don't feel like they have the player, like the fit's just not there.
That's Marco D'Amico. Follow him at MN D'Amico with RG Media. Marco D'Amico, great stuff. Thanks as always, brother. And we'll be here summer months, winter months. We're here every month. You can follow Marco D'Amico on X at MN D'Amico and check him out at RG Media where they're hiring. So if this is something you want to explore in terms of a career, a pivot perhaps, here's what they call an opportunity. Thank you, Marco.
Thank you, guys. Have a good one.